Start with the common perception of religious rituals: the rhythmic swaying, the synchronized prostrations, the precise chanting. For decades, academic anthropology followed thinkers like Saussure and Levi-Strauss, assuming these physical movements were arbitrary cultural symbols. Under this structuralist view, a ritual operates strictly as a social placebo. It is a shared meaning response that only yields a psychological effect if you are already an indoctrinated believer. However, recent research into the mind-body connection has identified a conflict between this cultural model and the way our neurobiology actually responds to physical input. Dismissing these practices as arbitrary cultural artifacts ignores the reality of human neurobiology. They function as highly sophisticated biomechanically engineered tools. Researcher Brendan R. Ozawa da Silva defines these contemplative practices as embodied cognitive logics. In practical terms, these rituals function as biological algorithms. They run on the universal neural hardware shared by every human being. Theological assent does not drive the psychological output. The physical inputs themselves, the postures, the breathing rates, the specific vocalizations, force the cognitive effect. Because the efficacy of these practices rely on universal biology, their mechanisms can be entirely decoupled from their original religious origins. To understand how these ancient algorithms work, we first have to examine how the human brain actually stores and retrieves knowledge. The legacy A-modal model treats knowledge as abstract code in a mental black box, disconnected from sensation. Grounded cognition proposes learning doesn't erase physical experience. Recalling a concept runs an embodied simulation, reactivating the exact sensory pathways that fired originally. Because cognition is physically bound to these sensory modalities, the mechanism works in reverse. Deliberately adopting specific physical postures or facial expressions actively forces the brain to trigger the associated neural simulations. Researchers call this cumulative interaction effects. Aligning your physical posture, your emotional affect, and your chosen vocabulary dramatically accelerates specific cognitive processing. We can observe this cognitive engineering in historical religious texts. Consider the instructions recorded by the 8th century Buddhist adept Padmasambhava, designed to deliberately induce a state of deep disillusionment. The text demands specific biomechanical inputs: planting the right foot, resting the elbow on the knee, and pressing the palm against the cheek. Combined with a precisely rhythmic vocalized phrase, this deliberate engineering of grounded cognition reliably induces stark depression. Compare the efficacy of this targeted algorithm with a vague A-modal command like, "just try to feel sad." The specific physical alignment executes the desired cognitive state directly, rather than relying entirely on sheer mental willpower. Ancient contemplative traditions mapped and utilized our biological operating systems with extreme precision, long before modern neuroscience had the vocabulary to describe them. These embodied logics rarely operate in isolation. They are sequenced into what is called a diachronic dynamic causal relationship. One specific cognitive state systematically induces the next. Cognitively based compassion training, or CBCT, provides a modern, secularized example of this sequential logic. The practitioner begins by deliberately reflecting on kindness received from others. Sustaining this reflection forces the biological emergence of deep gratitude. This gratitude serves as the mechanical prerequisite, driving the desire to repay kindness, finally yielding genuine, unbiased compassion. A practitioner cannot biologically skip straight to compassion without passing through the intermediate neural simulations. Achieving any complex, high-order moral emotion physically requires carefully executing a strict biological sequence of prerequisite cognitive states. Understanding the raw mechanics of these algorithms allows us to extract them from their historical and religious contexts. The primary conceptual framework for this extraction comes from the Dalai Lama through his model of secular ethics. In this framework, secular does not mean anti-religious. It denotes an impartial reliance on scientific evidence, common sense, and common human experience. The system rests on an axiomatic foundation: the universally shared biological drive for well-being and the avoidance of suffering. Because the efficacy of these practices relies on human neurobiology rather than theological assent, The physical mechanisms can and should be separated from Buddhist dogma. Viewing rituals as universal biological tools rather than exclusive religious property allows humanity to apply them to collective, global problems. This framework reveals a structural disconnect in how modern public education approaches ethical development. Currently, schools rely entirely on amodal, abstract injunctions. They dictate rules like "don't cheat" or "be kind" as standalone concepts. These abstract rules provide students with zero practical biological techniques to actually manage their emotional reactions in real time. Integrating secularized, step-by-step contemplative algorithms like CBCT directly into the classroom provides a rigorous solution. It shifts ethical education from merely dictating moral standards to actively training the biomechanical capacity for self-regulation and pro-social behavior. Utilizing grounded cognition techniques in schools is an application of neuroscience, not a stealth religious infiltration. By recognizing contemplative practices as grounded cognitive algorithms, we can stop wishing for better ethical behavior and start engineering it from the biological ground.